Is The Sims 4 actually bad, or am I just being dramatic? I have made a lot of videos whinging about how bad The Sims 4 is, especially compared to the previous Sims games. And usually when I do Let's Plays of previous Sims games, I do have criticisms about them, but in general, I usually enjoy them a lot more. And that's simply because they have a lot more content. The Sims from the offset was a very, very simple concept. You just play with life. Anything that you can do in real life, you can do in The Sims. And because of that unique concept, it's what led it on to be one of the best-selling video games of all time. Each Sims game, although basically the exact same thing, has expanded on the last in some kind of way. But when you look at The Sims 4, it's very difficult to understand what did they actually expand on other than a few quality of life changes, especially when you compare it to its prequel, The Sims 3, which is objectively and arguably a lot better in many ways. And you could argue, well, The Sims 3 and The Sims 4 are not the same game, they're totally different experiences. And to an extent, I understand that, but to that I also say the whole point of a sequel is to be better than the previous. If it's not better than the previous, but is in fact many ways worse than the previous, I ask, what is the point in making a sequel? And it's a shame because we've actually seen this not just happen with The Sims, but also so many other video games. I'm sure many of us old simulation gaming fans, or back then we called it tycoon gaming, the latest SimCity game is considered to be the worst one of all time, the one that killed off the franchise. And now people are saying that The Sims 4 is the worst Sims game even though it's the latest one. And I think it goes to show that simply having quality of life improvements with graphics and aesthetics doesn't make a game good, because a lot of people say, well, The Sims 4 is so pretty, which it is. It's the prettiest Sims game, but I don't think a pretty game is a good game. I play so many games which are ugly but are really great games. That's why games like Minecraft are so popular. Minecraft is an ugly game, okay, but it's very popular and there's a reason for that. And I think it's a difficult point to argue because the majority of people in the world who have played The Sims have only ever played The Sims 4. They've never played any previous Sims games, and I get why they don't want to, because firstly, you can't get The Sims 1 and 2. EA have abandoned the games. They are abandonware now. But secondly, The Sims 3 is very expensive and it is uglier than The Sims 4, so I can understand why people don't want to play it, I really do. But it's a shame that the previous Sims games haven't got as much love from EA, because I think if they did, people would go back and play them. 100%, I'm honestly 100% sure if EA put The Sims 2 Ultimate Collection back on the EA app, so many Sims 4 players would just return back to it. But I think the main issues I have with The Sims 4 is the base game itself, because however many packs you add to The Sims 4, if the base game is bad, it's always going to be a bad game. When The Sims 4 first released, infants didn't exist, toddlers didn't exist, amongst many other things that didn't exist in the base game, and they're still playing catch up. Infants were only released this year for The Sims 4, in the, I believe, 8th year of The Sims lifespan, and infants that are not tied to a crib were something that existed in The Sims 2 and The Sims 3, so it's taken 8 years of The Sims 4 base game to be out for them to finally update it with something that was in the base game of the previous installments from the offset. And even though it's good that they're at least trying to make it better, the problem with this is that because the game has been out for so long with so many features added, it's getting more and more broken. And the game was fundamentally broken, in my personal opinion, when it was first released back in the day. And however great it is that they give us more and more gameplay, more and more free updates, these updates fundamentally just don't work. Infants, if you try playing with them, the absolute hell, they really don't work very well at all. They are so buggy, you basically can't use them. And it's like, however much they try and play catch up, however much they try and make the base game good, they fundamentally can't, because the platform that it was built on is just so bad. I believe there's a saying like beating a dead horse when it's down or something like that. I feel like that's what maxes do with The Sims 4. It is a bad game, but people are still purchasing DLC for this bad game. People still have an addiction to The Sims and they will buy, you know, packs, even if they're absolutely awful, bad value for money and shallow gameplay. And because people will still buy them, they will continue to make packs for the game. But with the packs getting increasingly more and more shallow with less and less gameplay, The Sims 4 is feeling even more disappointing than it did when it first started. I mean, the whole thing was a disappointment from the start, and it will be a disappointment till the end as well. And it's a shame because I really didn't want it to be that way. I really wanted The Sims 4 to get its act together, but unfortunately it didn't. It started getting even worse. There could be a million reasons why it could be worse, and I could rant on for an hour, but I won't. But I don't want to be totally negative. There are some good points about The Sims 4. Even though the build mode does have a lot of limits compared to The Sims 3 build mode, it also has a lot more flexibility. In many ways, The Sims 4 is basically like the best build simulator out there right now. Even games which are like fully dedicated build simulators are not as good as The Sims 4 in many ways. The Sims 4 has enormous creativity and enormous flexibility with building basically anything. I also think Creative Sim mode is impeccable in The Sims 4. I do think it's very complex. It's not the best character creator in the world by far. There are so many games with much better character creators, but it is very easy to create characters in The Sims 4. But the actual gameplay itself, I think, lacks so much complexity. And I feel like with The Sims 4, they have gone for quantity over quality. In regards to packs, we got such a large quantity of packs, but they're not generally very good quality. Most of them are quite shallow. And I think it causes a lot of frustration with The Sims 4 because even though we have so many features now, a lot of these features just aren't in depth enough to warrant playing with them. Your sim can have an outdoorsy trait, but they can also have an outdoorsy lifestyle if you have snowy escape. What's actually the difference between these two things? It's very complicated, and I think this is the issue in general with The Sims 4. It's complicated but not complex, and I feel like there's a big difference. The Sims 4 has so many different features in it, especially if you own a lot of the packs, and altogether this makes the game very complicated, but it doesn't make it complicated in a challenging, complex way like solving a puzzle. It makes it complicated in terms of like being messy and genuinely just not understanding it. And I think that's the main issue with The Sims 4 in general. I feel like there's too much going on, but also not enough going on at the same time. And the fact that it's way too complicated, I think, is one of the most frustrating things, because I've said before, I really love retail gameplay. I think it's really fun creating my own shop and selling things in my own shop. But in The Sims 4, actually being able to just manage and start your own shop is so hard. It's so complicated. There are so many prerequisites. It's impossible to get started really without cheating unless you want to spend a 20-hour grind raising up money in order to start your shop. That there's basically just no point. And even when I do start the shop, the amount of money that it would cost to buy and decorate the shop building is going to be so much money that I'm going to have to find a high-paid job in the game in order to afford to do that. But by that point, there's no point starting up a shop because the money that I'm making in this high-paid job outweighs the money that I'd make in a retail business. So in order to get a retail business, you have to start a high-paid job in order to get this low-paid retail shop business, unless you use cheats, but cheats defeat the whole point because it's not challenging. And even if you do manage to get it done, the retail system is so buggy and glitchy and poorly implemented that it just feels frustrating. And I think that logic applies to everything in The Sims 4. It's always so like backwards and it just doesn't make any sense. We are using Microsoft Paint to illustrate my point. If this here is a problem and this here is the solution, this is usually what you do in most video games, but in The Sims 4, this is what you do. You try and go through all these complicated processes and end up creeping around the solution because you can't deal with it. This is such a weird analogy, but does this make sense? It's why I would say, honestly, The Sims 4 is objectively a pretty bad game. Whenever I play The Sims 3, the gameplay genuinely feels rewarding. The economy feels a lot more balanced. Raising needs feels more challenging, but in a good way. The gameplay elements that do exist feel like they work with the base game, the ones that come in packs. And it just feels like there's a lot more to do. And the reason why I think previous Sims games are a lot better is because they're a lot more simple. They have genuine challenging elements, but they're implemented in a way that's a lot simpler. Take a look at my favorite Sims 3 pack, for example, World Adventures. It comes with 3 enormous worlds, but in these worlds, you have to complete missions in a set linear path. And when you complete these missions, you have to go through different tombs, you have to explore different places, and in order to unlock the next place, you have to raise up a certain skill or buy a certain item or discover a secret key item that's hidden in a tomb. You have to go back and forth between the different areas, and it's all set and done in a structure that is linear, but it doesn't feel linear. It feels open. It feels rewarding, and it feels challenging in a way that's complex but not complicated. And this is why I say I'm not being dramatic. I think so, in my opinion, when I say The Sims 4 is bad, because it has a lot of features, so many features, but because of the way that they're implemented, it doesn't feel fun. It feels frustrating. Sometimes less is more, and although in many ways I do criticize The Sims 2 and The Sims 3 for not being in depth in many ways, but I also appreciate the fact that they're not in depth in certain ways, because it means you can enjoy the game in a way that doesn't feel frustrating and complicated. Because of the way The Sims 4 is, and the way a lot of simmers have just accepted the new low as like a standard for The Sims, it makes me really worried that The Sims 5 is also going to be pretty awful, especially in regards to microtransactions and things. I have done a video expressing my concerns about The Sims 5, so make sure you check that out. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching this ranty video. I will see you in the next one.